I've been working at this company for over a decade. I've seen golden boys come and go, but Bob takes the cake. Let me back up. I started at this firm right out of college, 23 years old, full of energy and ideas. I worked my way up over 12 years to a senior management position. I was respected. I was good at my job. Then I had a baby. That's when everything changed. My boss, the CEO, will call him Dick because, well, he's a dick. Dick used to praise me constantly. I was his go-to person, the one who could handle any crisis. But the moment I came back from maternity leave, the vibe shifted. I was suddenly the mom in the office, not in a good way. He started treating me like his mother, asking me to manage his schedule, remind him of meetings, even pick up his dry cleaning once. I thought I was overreacting at first. Maybe I was being sensitive, but then the promotions started going to other people, specifically Bob. Bob was hired about 5 years ago. He was charming, good-looking, always had a story. When his wife had a baby and became a SAHM, Dick was over the moon. Family man, he'd say. That's the kind of dedication we need. Bob started coming in later and later. Sometimes he'd show up at 10, take a nap in his office and leave by 3, but Dick didn't care. Bob got promoted, then Bob got promoted again, then his family had an emergency and moved across the country, another promotion. Within a year, Bob went from being my junior to being my equal. Then a couple months ago, he got promoted above me. He was now my boss's peer. I was still stuck in the same role, silently demoted after having a baby. I tried to let it go. I focused on my work. I kept my head down, but then Bob texted me. It was a Tuesday afternoon around 2. I was in the middle of a spreadsheet when my phone buzzed. Bob's name popped up. We rarely texted. I opened it. Hey, I know this is last minute, but we're coming to town for a conference in January. Would you be able to host my wife, toddler, and dog for the week? If not, no worries. I'll ask the company to cover a hotel. I stared at the screen. I blinked. I read it again. Host his wife, toddler, and dog for a week in my home for free. And if I said no, he'd just have the company pay for a hotel. The same company that hadn't given me a raise in 4 years. The same company that had silently demoted me for having the audacity to have a baby. The same company that had promoted this guy over and over while he slept at his desk. I didn't scream. I just felt this cold wave of disbelief wash over me. I thought, this cannot be real. I took a screenshot. I texted my husband, you won't believe what Bob just asked me. He replied with a string of laughing emojis. Then tell him no. But it wasn't that simple. Bob didn't just ask me. He had asked me, a subordinate, to house his family, and if I said no, he'd go to Dick, and Dick would probably make me look like the bad guy. I could already hear it. Bob is a family man, he needs support, and you're being selfish. I decided to play dumb. I replied, Bob, I'm sorry, I don't think I can. My house is small and we have our own family, but I'm sure the company can arrange a hotel. He didn't reply. I thought that was the end of it, but then my phone rang. It was Dick's assistant. Dick wants to see you in his office in 10 minutes. I took a deep breath. I grabbed a notepad. I walked down the hall. My heart was pounding. Dick was sitting at his desk, leaning back in his chair with that smug smile. Bob was standing next to him. Close the door, Dick said. I closed it. Bob tells me you weren't able to help him out with accommodations, Dick said, like it was a minor inconvenience. I can't host his family for a week, I said. I have my own kids, my own life. It's not reasonable. Dick's smile didn't waver. Bob is a key player on this team. He's doing important work. We need to support him. I support him by doing my job, I said. I don't think my job includes housing his family, Bob spoke up. I didn't mean to put you out. I just thought since you live close to the conference center. I almost laughed. I live 40 minutes from the conference center. He had no idea where I lived. I can't, I said again. Dick leaned forward. Look, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm just asking you to be a team player. Bob is bringing his whole family because he's a devoted dad. That's the kind of culture we want here. I wanted to scream, devoted dad. He's a devoted dad who sleeps at his desk while his wife does all the work, but I just nodded. I understand, but I still can't. There was a long silence. Dick looked at Bob. Bob shrugged. Fine, Dick said. We'll figure something else out. You can go. I left. I went back to my desk and sat there for 5 minutes shaking. I thought about all the years I had given to this company, all the late nights, all the weekends, all the times I had covered for Bob when he was working from home but was actually at the golf course. And this was the thanks I got. That night, I told my husband the whole story. He was furious. You need to go to HR, he said. I knew he was right, but HR was a joke at this company. They were Dick's people. They would spin it as me being difficult, not a team player, another emotional woman who couldn't handle stress, but I couldn't let it go. I started documenting everything. Every time Bob came in late, every nap he took, every favor Dick asked me to do for him, I saved emails, I took screenshots, I built a file. Then Bob's trip came and went. He never asked again, but the tension in the office was palpable. Dick started giving me the cold shoulder. Bob would walk past my desk without saying hello. I was being isolated. I knew I had to leave, so I started looking. I updated my resume. I applied to a dozen places. I had interviews. And then 3 weeks later, I got an offer. Better pay, better benefits, a boss who actually respected me. I gave my notice. Dick seemed surprised. Bob just looked relieved. On my last day, I walked out of that building and I didn't look back. I felt lighter than I had in years. But I never forgot that text, the audacity of it, the sheer entitlement. And I realized something in that moment. I wasn't just angry at Bob. I was angry at the system that rewarded men for being family men while punishing women for being mothers. I'm not saying all companies are like that, but mine was, and I'm glad I got out. Now I'm sitting in my new office. My new boss just bought me a coffee. She asked about my kids. She didn't treat me like I was incapable. She treated me like a human. And Bob, last I heard, he got another promotion. But his wife filed for divorce. I saw it on Facebook. Sometimes the system breaks itself. I don't know if that's justice, but it's something. Anyway, that's my story about the time my boss asked me to host his family. I thought it was insane, but it turns out some people just have no boundaries. Now let me tell you about another crazy situation. This one involves my son and his ex-girlfriend. That story, it's a whole different level of messed up, so let me tell you about my son. He just turned 16. Good kid mostly. He was dating this girl. She was almost 17. They seemed happy. I thought they were just doing normal teenage stuff. I was wrong. They broke up about a month ago. I didn't pry. Teenagers break up. It happens. But then her parents called us. They said she was pregnant. She was already showing a little. The timeline matched up with when my son was dating her. My wife went into full panic mode. I wasn't far behind. We waited a couple days to tell our son. We wanted to be sure. We wanted to have a plan. When we finally sat him down, he looked confused. Then he looked angry. It's not mine, he said. I never fucked her. I didn't believe him at first. I knew he was active. He'd asked me for condoms before. I was proud he was being responsible, but I also knew teenagers lie, so I pressed him. He kept saying the same thing. They never had sex. He said he cheated on her. That threw me. I had a heart-to-heart with him. I told him to be honest. He was a complete shithead about it, but I started to believe him. He said he always wrapped it up. He even asked me for restocks on a regular schedule. That kid was paranoid about protection. My wife didn't believe him. She thought I was being naive. She said I was part of boy culture, whatever that meant. She said I was making excuses for him. We had a meeting with her parents. Both families sat in their living room. It was awkward as hell. My wife started the conversation by just accepting that our son was the father. She was already talking about funding and solutions. I stayed quiet. My son spoke up. He said it again. It's not my baby. We never had sex. I watched his ex-girlfriend's face. She looked hurt, but she also looked uncertain. She didn't jump in and confirm anything. Then my son made a comment. I'm going to rephrase it because it was crude. He said they only ever did a certain act, the kind that can't result in a baby. He said it was unsatisfying, so he never went further. I was furious at him for talking like that, so was my wife. We raged at him right there in front of everyone. His ex-girlfriend finally spoke. She admitted they rarely did it. But she described an event, the when and where. It was specific, it was believable. My son is a liar, I know that. He's an absolute dog sometimes, but I still believed him. Something didn't add up. My wife was livid with me. She said I was playing into his nonsense. She said I was enabling him. She said if I kept this up, she would handle it herself. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck between my son and my wife. I felt like no matter what I said, someone would be angry. The paternity test came back. It wasn't his. I felt relief, but also this heavy guilt. My wife was shocked. She apologized to our son, but he was cold. He wouldn't look at her. He said he'd told us the truth, and we didn't believe him. I couldn't argue with that. Then the real bombshell dropped. My son came to me a few days later. He was nervous. He said he needed to tell me something. He said he's gay. He'd been hiding it because he was scared of how I'd react. He said that's why he never wanted to go further with his ex. He said he cared about her, but he wasn't attracted to her that way. I didn't scream. I didn't get angry. I just hugged him. I told him I loved him. I told him I was proud of him for being honest. My wife took it harder. She cried. She said she felt like she'd failed him. She said she should have known, but eventually she came around. She's trying. Now my son has a boyfriend. He seems happy. His ex-girlfriend had a baby. It's not his, obviously. She's raising it with the actual father who stepped up. It worked out, but that whole situation, it nearly tore my marriage apart. My wife and I are still working through it. We go to counseling now. We're learning to communicate better. But I'll never forget the look on her face when she asked me to take her side, and I couldn't. I thought I was overreacting when I started doubting my own judgment. But sometimes you just know when your kid is telling the truth, even when they've lied before, even when it's easier to believe the obvious story. Sometimes the truth is hidden behind all the messy, awkward details. That's the story about my son and his ex-girlfriend's pregnancy. It's not the kind of story you tell at parties, but it's real. And it taught me that trust is more complicated than I ever realized. Let me tell you about that meeting with Dick. I walked in with my head held high, still shaking from Bob's text. Dick was leaning back in his chair, phone in hand, not even looking at me. He gestured for me to sit. I sat. So Bob mentioned his travel plans, Dick said, still scrolling. He said you weren't able to help him out. I took a breath. He asked me to host his wife, toddler, and dog for a week. That's not a small favor. I have my own family, my own life. Dick finally looked up. He's in a tough spot. Wife's family is going through something. He needs support. You're a senior employee. I thought you'd be willing to step up. Step up? I said. I haven't gotten a raise in 4 years. You demoted me after I had my baby, and Bob gets promoted every time he breathes. How is that fair? Dick's face went hard. That demotion was a restructuring. It wasn't personal, and Bob's promotions are based on his performance. His performance? I laughed. I couldn't help it. He sleeps at his desk. He comes in late every day. You know that. Everyone knows that. Dick stood up. I think we're done here. I expect you to be a team player. If you can't do that, maybe this isn't the right place for you. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, I just nodded and walked out. That's when I knew I had to go to HR. HR was a woman named Cheryl. She'd been there 20 years. She listened to my story, took notes, and then said the words I'd been dreading. It's not illegal to ask a coworker for a favor. It's in bad taste, but there's nothing we can do. I told her about the demotion, about the lack of raises, about Bob's preferential treatment. She sighed, do you have any documentation? I had nothing. I'd been too trusting, too naive. But after that meeting, I started keeping a log. Every late arrival, every nap, every time Bob missed a deadline and I had to cover, I wrote it all down in a notebook I kept in my bag. I took screenshots of the text where Bob asked me to host his family. I saved emails where Dick copied me on things that should have been Bob's responsibility. I was building a case even though I wasn't sure what I'd do with it. Then Bob's trip came and went. He never asked again, but the office became hostile. Dick stopped saying hello. Bob would walk past my desk like I was invisible. I heard through the grapevine that Dick had told other managers I was emotional and difficult to work with. I started applying for jobs that same week. I updated my resume. I reached out to old contacts. I had 3 interviews in 2 weeks. On the third one, I got an offer. It was a smaller company, but the pay was better and the benefits were solid. The CEO was a woman. She asked me about my kids during the interview and didn't once imply I was less capable because I was a mother. I gave my notice on a Friday. Dick didn't even look up. He just said, fine. Bob had the audacity to act surprised. Where are you going? He asked. Somewhere I'm respected, I said, and I walked out. That was 6 months ago. My new job is amazing. My boss buys me coffee. She asks about my kids like she actually cares. I'm not afraid to take maternity leave if I need to. I'm not punished for being a parent. I saw on LinkedIn that Bob got another promotion. But 3 weeks later, his wife posted about their divorce, something about irreconcilable differences. I didn't feel good about it, but I also didn't feel bad. Anyway, that's the full boss story. Now let me finish the one about my son. After that paternity test came back negative, I thought things would settle down. My wife apologized to our son. He was cold to her for weeks. He'd barely eat dinner with us. He'd lock himself in his room. I tried to talk to him. One night, I knocked on his door. He said, come in that flat teenage voice. I sat on the edge of his bed. He was on his phone, not looking at me. I believe you, I said. I know it wasn't your baby. He looked up. But Mom didn't. She still doesn't, does she? She's trying. It's hard for her. He put his phone down. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out. I braced myself. I'm listening. He told me he was gay. He said he'd known for a while. He said the reason he never wanted to go all the way with his ex was because he wasn't attracted to her. He cared about her, but it wasn't that kind of connection. He'd been scared to tell me because of how I'd react. I didn't scream. I didn't get angry. I just hugged him. I told him I loved him. I told him I was proud of him for being honest. He cried a little. I cried a little. When I told my wife, she broke down. She said she felt like she'd failed him. She said she should have known. She went to him that night and apologized for not believing him about the pregnancy. She told him she loved him no matter what. He hugged her, but it was stiff. It took months for them to get back to normal. We started family counseling. The therapist helped us work through the trust issues. My wife admitted she'd been too quick to assume the worst about our son. I admitted I'd been too passive in standing up for him. Now my son has a boyfriend. They've been together for about 4 months. He brings him over for dinner. They're cute together. My wife still gets a little teary-eyed sometimes, but she's supportive. As for his ex-girlfriend, she had her baby. It's a girl. The real father stepped up. I saw them at the grocery store once. She looked happy. I waved. She waved back. I don't know if I handled everything perfectly, but I learned that sometimes you have to trust your gut, even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong. Even when your own wife is telling you you're part of the problem. And I learned that the system at my old job was broken, but I got out. And my son is going to be fine. So yeah, that's my story. I thought it was just about a crazy boss and a teenage pregnancy. But it turned out to be about trust, about standing up for yourself and for the people you love. I don't know if anyone reading this will relate, but if you're in a job where you're treated like I was, leave. If you're in a family situation where you don't know who to believe, trust your gut. And if your son comes out to you, hug him. Because at the end of the day, those are the moments that matter, not the promotions, not the money. The moments where you choose to believe someone even when it's hard. I thought I was overreacting when I started doubting what my wife was saying about our son. But that family meeting changed everything. Her parents showed up first. The mother was already crying. The father looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. My wife had her arms crossed, staring at our son like he was a stranger. I tried to keep my voice calm. Let's just talk this through, I said. We don't know for sure yet. My wife snapped. He's the only boyfriend she's had. The dates line up. How much more proof do you need? Our son was sitting on the couch, head down, fists clenched. He didn't look up. Ex-girlfriend's mother started talking about doctor's appointments and due dates. She said the girl was about 8 weeks along. She listed the timeline. It matched exactly with when our son and his ex were together. My wife nodded along. We'll support her, we'll help with the expenses, we'll figure out custody or whatever needs to happen. That's when our son spoke. His voice was shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. I told you, we never had sex. We did other stuff, but not that. My wife stood up. Stop lying. You told me you asked for condoms. You told him, she pointed at me, that you needed protection. That's why we bought them. Our son looked at me pleading. Dad, I needed them for something else. I can't say right now, but I swear I never touched her like that. I remembered the conversation we'd had about protection. He'd asked for condoms, yeah, but he never said it was for her. I'd assumed. The ex-girlfriend's father jumped in. So you're saying my daughter is a liar? Our son shook his head. No, I'm saying we never did that. She might think we did, but we didn't. Maybe she's confused. Maybe she's scared, but it's not mine. The room went silent. Wife was red in the face. She looked at me like she expected me to take her side. I didn't. I said, let's get a paternity test. When the baby is born, that'll settle it, my wife gasped. You can't be serious. You're believing him over her. I'm believing science, I said. It's not personal, it's just facts. The ex-girlfriend's parents looked at each other. The mother nodded slowly. The father shrugged. Fine, we'll do the test, but if it comes back positive, we expect you to step up. Our son said it won't. The meeting ended. My wife barely spoke to me on the way home. She said I was enabling him. She said I was part of the problem, part of that boy culture that lets boys get away with anything. I didn't scream. I just said, I trust my son. She laughed. It was bitter. Your son who cheated on his girlfriend? Your son who lied about using protection? He didn't lie about the protection. He just didn't tell me why. And he never said he used them with her. That shut her up. Over the next few weeks, things were tense. Our son stayed in his room. My wife slept on the couch twice. I started looking into paternity test procedures. I called a lawyer just to know what we were dealing with if it turned out he was the father. Then one night our son came to me. He looked like he'd been crying. He said he needed to tell me something, but he was scared. I sat down with him. He told me he was gay. He said he'd known since middle school. He said the reason he never wanted to go all the way with his ex was because he wasn't attracted to her. He cared about her as a friend, but that was it. He got with her because he was scared of what people would think if he didn't have a girlfriend. He told me about the condoms. He said he and his boyfriend, some kid from the next town over, had been together for months. They used protection, that's why he asked me for them. I didn't get angry. I hugged him. I told him I loved him. I said I was proud of him for being honest. He cried into my shoulder. I thought you'd hate me. I could never hate you. The next day, I told my wife. She broke down. She said she felt like she'd failed him. She said she should have known. She cried for an hour. Then she went to his room and apologized for not believing him about the pregnancy. She told him she loved him no matter what. Son hugged her, but it was stiff. It took months for them to rebuild that trust. We started family therapy. The therapist helped my wife see that she had been too quick to judge. She admitted she was scared of the scandal, scared of what people would say. I admitted I should have stood up for him earlier. The paternity test came back negative, just like our son said. The ex-girlfriend's parents called us. They apologized for the drama. The real father ended up being a guy she met at a party. He was 18, he stepped up, at least financially. I saw her at the grocery store about a year later. She had a baby girl in the cart. She looked happy. I waved. She waved back. No hard feelings. Our son is doing well. He brings his boyfriend over for dinner. My wife still gets a little teary-eyed, but she's learning. The other day she said, I'm glad we didn't force him into something. I said, I'm glad you trust him now. She nodded. It took me a while. That's the story. It taught me that even when the evidence points one way, sometimes the truth is hidden. And that trust isn't blind. It's based on knowing someone's character, even when they've made mistakes. Now about that boss story. After I left that job, I found out a few things. Bob's wife divorced him about 6 months later. I saw it on her Facebook. She posted about being a single mom now. I didn't feel bad. He treated me like a servant and the company let him, but karma's a thing. I'm in a better place now. My new boss treats me like a human being. I get paid what I'm worth. I can take time off for my kid without being demoted. It's not perfect, but it's good. Sometimes I think about that text Bob sent. I still can't believe he asked me to host his whole family, but I'm glad I said no. I'm glad I stood my ground. If you're in a job like that, leave. If you're in a family situation where you don't know who to believe, trust your gut. And if your son comes out to you, hug him. Because at the end of the day, those moments matter more than any promotion or paycheck. But let me tell you about that boss story. That one still makes my blood boil when I think about it. I worked for a company where the CEO, let's call him Dick because that's what he was, had this golden boy named Bob. Bob was a mediocre employee at best. He showed up late, slept at his desk, missed deadlines. But his wife was a stay-at-home mom, and Dick thought that was the most admirable thing in the world. So Bob kept getting promoted. Meanwhile, I had been there for years. I managed a whole team. I kept things running. I never missed a day, but when I had a baby, suddenly I was less committed. I got silently demoted. My responsibilities stayed the same, but my title changed. My paycheck stayed the same too, no raise in 4 years. Dick acted like I had betrayed him by having a child. Like I was supposed to stay at my desk 24/7, never taking maternity leave, never needing to pick up a sick kid. I didn't complain. I just kept my head down and did my work because that's what you do, right? You don't make waves. Then Bob moved across the country for a family emergency. And guess what? Another promotion. He went from being under me to being at my level. Then a few months ago, he got promoted again. Now he outranks me. So imagine my surprise when I get a text from him one Tuesday afternoon. Hey, I have a favor to ask. My wife and toddler and dog need a place to stay for a week in January. Can they crash at your place? If not, I can ask the company to pay for a hotel. I stared at my phone. I reread the message 3 times. My jaw literally dropped. This guy, who I barely even talk to anymore, wants me to host his entire family for a week for free, and he mentioned the company paying as an afterthought, like if that doesn't work, maybe they'll cover it. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there fuming. This is the same guy who gets praised for being a family man while I get demoted for being a mother. The same guy who can't even show up on time. And now he wants me to be his free airbimb. I went to my meeting with Dick that afternoon. Sure enough, he brought it up. Hey, Bob mentioned he asked you about hosting his family. That would be really great if you could help out. He's going through a lot right now. I said, I can't. I have my own family. My house isn't big enough. Dick frowned. Come on, it's just for a week. Think of it as team building. Team building? Hosting my boss's family in my home? I didn't scream. I just said no. I can't. Dick didn't push it, but I could tell he was annoyed. The rest of the meeting was icy. That night I talked to my husband. He said, you need to get out of there. This is insane. I knew he was right, but finding a new job is hard. I have a kid, I have bills, I can't just quit. I started applying. Nothing came through for months. Meanwhile, the tension at work got worse. Bob started CCing me on emails asking for status updates on things I wasn't even responsible for. He'd call me during my lunch break. He even showed up at my desk once and said, hey, I got a hotel for my family, but it would really help if you could watch the dog during the day. The dog. He wanted me to dog sit while he was at work for a week. I said no to that too. Then I found out through the grapevine that Bob's wife was not happy. Apparently she didn't want to travel with a toddler and a dog, but Bob forced it. He wanted to show off to the CEO that he was handling it. Classic golden boy behavior. I started documenting everything, every weird request, every passive-aggressive email. Every time Dick or Bob made a comment about me being a mother, I built a file. One day, Bob sent an email to the whole department. I want to thank everyone who has offered to help my family during our visit. It means a lot to me. Special thanks to my name for considering it. I never considered it, I said no, but he framed it like I was on board. I was furious. I marched into HR, I showed them the email, I showed them the text, I showed them the pattern of behavior. The HR lady looked uncomfortable. I see, well, he shouldn't have sent that, but it's not exactly a policy violation. I said, what about the demotion I got after having a baby? What about the fact that I haven't had a raise in 4 years while Bob gets promoted for being a dad? She shifted in her chair. That's a performance issue, not a discrimination issue. I knew then that HR wasn't going to help me. They were there to protect the company, not me, so I started looking harder for a new job. I applied to 20 places a week. I went on interviews during my lunch breaks. I lied about doctor's appointments. It took 6 months, but I got an offer. Better pay, better title, actual respect. I gave my 2 weeks' notice. Dick called me into his office. I'm surprised you're leaving. We were just about to discuss your career growth. I almost laughed. Really? Because it's been 4 years, he shrugged. You never asked. I didn't argue. I just said, I'm leaving for a better opportunity. Thank you for the experience. Bob didn't even say goodbye. He was too busy planning his next promotion. A year later, I heard Bob's wife left him. She took the kid and the dog and moved back to her parents' house. Apparently, the family man image was all for show. He was never home. He was always at work or traveling. She got tired of it. I didn't feel bad. I felt vindicated. But the thing that still gets me is the audacity. To ask a coworker you barely know to host your entire family for a week. To assume that because I'm a woman, I'll just say yes and take care of everything. To think that your career matters more than mine because you have a wife at home. That story taught me something important. Your boss is not your friend, your company is not your family, and the golden boy, he'll fall eventually. It just takes time. I'm glad I said no. I'm glad I stood my ground. It cost me some peace of mind at work, but it saved my sanity. And now when I look back, I realize that whole experience was just another version of what happened with my son. People make assumptions. They judge based on surface-level facts. They think they know the whole story when they don't. The only difference is, with my son, I chose to believe him. With my boss, I chose to believe myself. And both times I was right. I thought I was done with that whole mess. But then about 3 months after the initial diagnosis debacle, wait, no, I'm jumping ahead. Let me rewind. That boss story took place over a year. The son's pregnancy drama, that was still simmering. After we had that family meeting with the ex-girlfriend's parents where my son kept insisting he never slept with her, my wife and I were at a total stalemate. She wouldn't even look at me for a week. She slept on the couch. She said I was enabling him, that I was part of boy culture. I felt like I was losing my mind. I started wondering if maybe I was wrong, maybe my son was lying. Kids lie. He'd lied before, but something in my gut just wouldn't let go. 2 weeks after that meeting, my son came into my home office on a Saturday morning. I was going over some paperwork, trying to distract myself. He looked terrible, pale, puffy eyes. He'd been crying. Dad, he said, voice cracking, I need to tell you something. I put my pen down. What is it, son? He sat in the chair across from me, then got up and paced. I wasn't totally honest with you about the girlfriend, about why we broke up. I felt my stomach drop. Here it comes, I thought, the confession. He took a deep breath. I'm gay, Dad. I've known for a while. Me and her, we never did anything. She was a cover. She knew, she was okay with it. I mean, she's not like a bad person. She was trying to help me hide. I just stared at him. My mind was spinning. All the anger, all the suspicion, all the fights with my wife, it all clicked into place. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was scared, he said. Mom is you know how she is about that stuff. She always talks about traditional families and God's plan. I didn't know how to say it. I stood up and hugged him. I didn't even think. I just hugged him. He was shaking. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, I said. I'm sorry I called you a liar. He sniffled. You did believe me about the baby, though. That's what matters. We sat back down and talked for an hour. He told me about his boyfriend, a kid from the debate team. They'd been together for 6 months. The ex-girlfriend was a friend from middle school who agreed to be a beard so his parents wouldn't find out. But then she got pregnant by someone else, a guy from a party, a random hookup. She was too scared to tell her parents, so she pinned it on my son because it was the easiest story. My son was furious about that. He said she betrayed him. But he also admitted he used her, which made him feel like a shithead, which he is, but a truthful shithead apparently. I told my wife that evening. She was sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea, still giving me the cold shoulder. We need to talk, I said. About what? How you're destroying our son's future. I took a breath. Our son is gay. She put her mug down so hard the tea sloshed over. What did you just say? I repeated it. I told her the whole story, the beard, the boyfriend, the pregnancy that wasn't his. Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds: disbelief, anger, denial, then pure heartbreak. No, she said. No, that's not true. He's just saying that to get out of responsibility. You're both manipulating me. I saw his phone, I said. He showed me texts, pictures. It's real. She didn't speak for a long time, then she started crying. Not angry tears, real painful sobs. I don't know how to be a mother to a gay son, she whispered. I reached for her hand. She pulled away. You need time, I said, but he needs you. He needs both of us. That night, we all sat in the living room together. My son was nervous, his boyfriend waiting in the car outside. My wife couldn't even look at him at first. Then he said, Mom, I'm still me. I'm still your son. Broke down. It wasn't a magical fix. She said a lot of stupid, hurtful things. It's just a phase. You haven't met the right girl. What will the church think? But by the end of the night, she was holding his hand. The ex-girlfriend's parents, we met with them again. We told them the truth. They were embarrassed, but also relieved. The real father turned out to be a kid from their own neighborhood. That family drama is not my story to tell. As for my son, he's still seeing his boyfriend. My wife is trying. She goes to therapy now. She still slips up, says things like when you have a family someday, and we both know she means with a woman, but she's getting better. It's hard. For all of us, but that whole experience changed me. It made me realize that assumptions can ruin relationships. Whether it's a boss assuming a mother can't be committed, or a wife assuming a son is a liar, or a father assuming his own kid is a deadbeat, you have to dig deeper. You have to listen. I'm not saying my son is an angel. He's a teenage boy who made some really stupid choices. But he's also a kid who was scared, trying to protect a part of himself he wasn't ready to share. And I'm glad I believed him. I'm glad I didn't force a paternity test or make him take responsibility for a baby that wasn't his. Because that would have been a disaster for everyone. And the boss story, yeah, that ended with a new job and a golden boy who crashed and burned. But the real lesson from both experiences is the same: trust your gut, stand your ground, and don't let anyone make you feel crazy for doing what's right, even if it means sleeping on the couch for a week. But the aftermath of the boss story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. That meeting with Dick I mentioned, the one where I took an aspirin before walking in, it was worse than I expected. I walked into his corner office on the 3rd floor. He had this massive mahogany desk that cost more than my car. Photos of his kids lined the shelves, but his wife's face was turned away in every single one. I always noticed details like that. Close the door, he said, not looking up from his phone. I closed it, sat down, waited. He finally looked at me. Bob tells me you're not willing to help out with his family situation. I kept my voice level. I'm not able to host his wife and toddler and dog for a week. No, I have my own family, my own responsibilities. Dick leaned back in his chair. You know, Carol, Bob has been through a lot. His wife needs a break. The company values family men. I'm a family woman, I said. I have a 2-year-old at home. I haven't had a raise in 4 years. I was silently demoted after I had my baby. He waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. That's different. You chose to have a child. Bob is being a provider. I felt my jaw tight. So having a baby as a woman means I'm less committed, but having a baby as a man means you get promoted. Don't make this about gender, he said, his voice dropping. You're being emotional, that word. Emotional, I'd heard it 1,000 times. Every time I spoke up, every time I asked for something, every time I didn't smile and nod. I'm not being emotional, I said. I'm being practical. I don't have space, I don't have time, and frankly, Bob and I aren't close enough for me to house his family. Dick stared at me. Bob said you two used to work closely together. He thought you'd be happy to help. Bob and I have never had a single conversation outside of work. He doesn't know my coffee order. He doesn't know my kid's name. He sent me a text asking for a massive favor with no preamble. Maybe if you were more of a team player, you'd have gotten those raises. That was when I knew this wasn't about Bob's family. This was about control, about putting me in my place. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just said, I'll consider this conversation noted. I walked out, closed the door quietly, went to my desk, and started updating my resume. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. Bob started seeing Dick on every email, little passive-aggressive notes, just checking in on the hospitality question. Wanted to make sure you had space in your calendar. My wife really needs this break. I ignored them all. I said no. I kept saying no. Then Bob's wife called me directly. I don't know how she got my number. She sounded exhausted, almost desperate. Carol, I'm so sorry to bother you. Bob said you might be able to help. I just need a place to stay for a few days. The hotel prices are insane. I promise will be no trouble. My son is potty training and the dog is crate trained. I felt a lump in my throat. She wasn't the enemy. She was a woman trapped in a situation she didn't create, but I still couldn't say yes. I'm sorry, I said. I really can't. I have a toddler myself. I'm working full-time. I don't have the bandwidth. She went quiet. I understand. I'm sorry for bothering you. I hung up and felt like garbage, but I knew I wasn't responsible for Bob's choices. I wasn't responsible for his lack of planning. I wasn't responsible for his promotion or his wife's burnout. 2 days later, Bob sent an email to the entire department. Subject line, family support needed. He listed his wife's needs, his toddler's schedule, his dog's vet records. He asked if anyone could host them for the week. He said the company would reimburse expenses. No one replied. Dick called a department meeting. He stood at the front of the room, arms crossed. I'm disappointed in this team. We're supposed to be a family. Bob is one of us. His family is our family. I stared at my shoes. No one spoke. Then Sarah from accounting raised her hand. Sir, I have a one-bedroom apartment. I can't host 4 people and a dog. Dick's face went red. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Sarah asked. The room went silent. Dick didn't answer. He just said meeting over. Bob ended up booking a hotel. He tried to expense it. The finance department denied it because it wasn't pre-approved. He went to Dick, who approved it anyway, special exception. I found out about that from Linda in HR. She pulled me aside one day. Carol, I need to warn you. Bob filed a complaint against you. He said you created a hostile work environment by refusing to help his family. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Linda, that's ridiculous. I know I killed it, but I wanted you to know what you're dealing with. I thanked her. Then I sent out another round of resumes. 3 months later, I had an offer. Better pay, better title, a company that actually valued me. I put in my 2 weeks' notice. Dick called me into his office. So you're leaving, he said, not looking at me. Yes. Where are you going? I told him. He went pale. That's a competitor. I know, he leaned forward. You can't do that. You signed a non-compete. I didn't sign anything. You never asked me to. He flipped through a file. His face dropped. We'll match the offer. No, double it. No, he slammed his hand on the desk. I made you, Carol. I gave you opportunities. You demoted me after I had a baby. You haven't given me a raise in 4 years. You expected me to house my coworker's family for free. I didn't say another word. I just stood up, walked out of his office, and finished my 2 weeks without so much as a goodbye email. On my last day, I cleared my desk. Sarah from accounting came over and hugged me. You're gonna do great, she said. And for what it's worth, I put in my notice too. I can't work for a man who thinks women are just help desks for his golden boys. I smiled. Good for you. I left that building and never looked back. My first week at the new job, I got an email from Linda in HR. She said Bob had been put on a performance improvement plan after 3 different clients complained he was unreachable. Dick had to deliver the news himself. Apparently, Bob tried to blame it on family stress, but Dick wasn't having it. The golden boy was tarnished. 6 months later, I heard Bob was let go. His wife moved back to her parents' place with the toddler and the dog. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but mostly relief. I wasn't the one who broke his family. He did that all by himself. My new boss is a woman in her 50s who has 3 kids and a husband who stays home. She never asks me to host anyone. She gives me raises without me asking. She treats me like a professional. And when I told her about my old job, she just shook her head and said, I've been there. That's why I started my own company. So yeah, the boss story ended better than I expected. But around the same time all that was happening, another situation unfolded in my family that made the work drama look tame. And this one hit a lot closer to home. Let me back up. My son had just turned 16 in August 2005. He'd been dating this girl, let's call her Emma, for about 8 months. She was almost 17. They seemed happy enough, but my wife and I kept a close eye on things. You know how it is, you want to trust your kid, but you also remember what you were like at that age. They broke up in late July. My son came home looking like someone kicked his dog. He said it was mutual, that they wanted different things. My wife hugged him. I gave him a pat on the back. We figured it was teenage drama. 3 weeks later, we got a call from Emma's parents. They wanted to meet. No details, just it's urgent. My heart sank on the drive over. I knew what was coming. We sat in their living room. Her mom was crying before she even said a word. Her dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. Emma is pregnant, he said. She's about 8 weeks along. The dates line up with when she was seeing your son. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My wife grabbed my arm. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God. We sat there in silence for a minute. Then her dad said, she's starting to show a little. We already talked to her doctor. She's healthy, but she's scared. My wife jumped in before I could speak. We'll take care of it, whatever you need. We'll figure out child support, co-parenting, whatever. Our son will step up. I nodded along because that's what you're supposed to do, but something felt off. I didn't say it out loud. I just said, let us talk to him first. He doesn't know. We went home and called our son into the kitchen. He was playing video games in his room, headphones on, completely oblivious. When we told him, he went pale. But then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed, not a funny haha laugh. A nervous, almost hysterical laugh. That's impossible, he said. I never slept with her. My wife's face went red. Don't lie to us. We know you're active. You asked for protection. I asked for condoms, yeah, but I never used them with her. We never did it. I stared at him. Then what did you do? He looked at the floor. We did stuff, but not that, I swear. My wife wasn't buying it. She started yelling. You're a liar. You're just trying to get out of responsibility. I raised you better than this, he yelled back. I'm not lying. I've never had sex with her. I don't even want to. That last line hung in the air. I saw something in his eyes, fear, real fear. I pulled him aside later that night. Sat on his bed. Son, I need you to be honest with me, really honest. If you're scared, I'll be on your side, but I need the truth. He broke down. Dad, I've never been with a girl. I'm not into girls. It hit me like a ton of bricks. You're gay, he nodded. I tried to like her, I really did, but I couldn't. I cheated on her, but not with another girl, with a guy from my school. That's why we broke up. She found out. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged him. Why didn't you tell us? Because mom would lose it and I wasn't ready. He was right about his mom. When I told her later that night, she lost it. Not about the gay part. She was more upset that he lied about the pregnancy. She kept saying, he's just saying that to get out of it. He's a coward. I tried to reason with her. He's never lied about something this big before, and think about it, if he really was the father, wouldn't he be panicking? He's calm because he knows it's not his. She didn't want to hear it. She called her sister, her mother, everyone. She told them our son was a deadbeat who knocked up a girl and then claimed to be gay to avoid responsibility. It was a mess. We had another meeting with Emma's parents. This time we brought our son. He stood in front of them, hands shaking but voice steady. I'm sorry for what I did to Emma. I cheated on her and that was wrong, but I never had sex with her. The baby isn't mine. Emma's dad looked at his daughter. Is that true? Emma wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. She just nodded. My wife went ballistic. You're covering for him. He's lying. Emma's mom put a hand on her shoulder. Emma already told us the truth. She had sex with someone else after they broke up. She was embarrassed, so she blamed your son. We're so sorry. That was the moment my wife's face went from angry to horrified. She looked at me like she'd been slapped. I don't understand. I put my hand on her back. He was telling the truth the whole time. She didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. On the drive home, she cried, not because she was sad, because she was ashamed. She had called her son a liar. She had trashed his reputation to the family, and she had completely missed the fact that he was trying to tell her something way more important. The next few weeks were brutal. My wife went into a depression. She barely talked to our son. He stayed in his room talking to his boyfriend on the phone. I was stuck in the middle. Finally, I convinced her to go to therapy. She agreed. After a few sessions, she started to come around. She apologized to our son, not a half-hearted apology, a real one. She told him she loved him no matter what. He forgave her. It took time, but they're in a better place now. And the ex-girlfriend, she had the baby. The real father turned out to be a different kid from their neighborhood. That family is dealing with their own drama, but it's not mine to tell. Looking back, I learned something from both stories. Whether it's a boss assuming you're just a helper because you're a woman or a wife assuming your son is a liar because he's a teenage boy, assumptions destroy trust. You have to dig deeper. You have to listen. I'm glad I believed my son. I'm glad I stood my ground at work. It cost me some sleepless nights and a few couch vacations, but in the end, I came out with my dignity intact. And my family, for all its cracks, is still together. That's the update. I hope someone out there reads this and remembers, the easy story is rarely the true story. I sat on the couch that night after everyone had gone to bed, staring at the ceiling. My wife was asleep in the guest room. She'd been sleeping there since the therapy sessions started, said she needed space to think. My son was in his room, probably texting his boyfriend. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I thought about the whole chain of events, how I'd walked into that meeting with Dick, the CEO, expecting a lecture about hosting Bob's family. How I'd walked out knowing I was being demoted for having a baby. How I'd spent months watching Bob get promoted for being a family man while I got pushed aside. And then how I'd come home to find my own family falling apart over a pregnancy that wasn't even my son's. It felt like the universe was testing me, like it was throwing every kind of assumption and bias at me to see if I'd break. I didn't break. I held on to my son's truth when no one else would. I stood up to my boss and his golden boy. I even stood up to my wife, which was the hardest thing I've ever done, because I love her but she was wrong, and I had to say it. A month after the meeting with Emma's parents, I got a text from Bob. He was reaching out because he'd heard I was looking for a new job. He said he had a friend who was hiring. I almost deleted it, but something made me open the link. It was a small company, about 15 people, run by a woman who used to work for Dick. She knew the whole story. She hired me on the spot, gave me a 30% raise, and told me she'd never ask me to host anyone's dog. My wife and I had a long talk last week. We sat on the back porch drinking coffee, watching the sun come up. She told me she was sorry for not believing our son. She said she'd been so scared of being a bad parent that she'd doubled down on being a controlling one. I told her I understood, but she needed to earn back his trust. She said she knew. She's been going to therapy every week, and she's started going with him too. They're talking now, really talking about who he is and who he wants to be. I'm not saying everything is perfect. There's still tension. My mother-in-law still makes comments about that whole mess. But my son looks me in the eye when he talks to me. He hugs me before bed. That's more than I had 6 months ago. The boss story and the pregnancy story taught me the same lesson. When you assume, you miss the truth. Dick assumed I was just a mother figure, not a professional. My wife assumed our son was a liar, not a gay kid struggling to come out. Both assumptions caused damage that took months to repair. And in both cases, the people who got hurt the most were the ones who had been telling the truth all along. I don't know if anyone reading this will take anything from it, but I hope so. Because if you're in a toxic workplace, get out. If your kid tells you something hard, believe them. And if your spouse is wrong, don't stay quiet to keep the peace. The peace isn't worth losing yourself over. That's my story. Thanks for reading. I'm going to go make breakfast for my son before school. He likes pancakes with too much syrup. I'm okay with that.